To me, it's like less of a knockdown, drag out fight. If you're like, we said we weren't going to throw a fit at the Chuck E. Cheese.
I don't know. It doesn't feel like that. Like less like we're the parent being stern and more like the coworker who's figured out a way to work with somebody that we have different working styles, you know?
For me, it feels like I'm like the negligent partner who's like, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Can we talk about what's really going on here? Like, let's sit down, please. What's happening? That's what I feel like.
Like, I know we're not really fighting about who's doing the dishes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I know this isn't actually about the footer. It's not. So, like, can we sit down and talk? And, like, can you fit me on your calendar, please?
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
We answer an author question.
Thanks, author.
Even worse, a reader question. Wait, better or worse? Hard to say. My biases are all over the place today. What
biases are showing?
How should a publisher manage author expectations? Starring special guest of the pod, Chris Vega of Blue Cactus Press. Chris, what would you suggest first and foremost to presses trying to manage author expectations?
Well, I think that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that I try to do it is when we start a project, we get everybody into one virtual space and go over the timelines and the goals and the expectations and let the author talk about their work. And so kind of setting everybody up at the same starting point on the path is helpful to us. And so much of it, you just kind of have to manage on the fly, I think, because what I find is like the bigger thing happening about author expectations is they sometimes, most of the time, especially with first-time authors, it's really hard for them to like really put themselves in the published writer persona. And so like they're sort of catching up to that as the publishing process moves forward. And then you get somewhere to like the proofing stage. And then there's like this crazy power struggle where they're like holding on to this manuscript shaking and they're like, it's not ready. And you're like, let me take that. It's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so sort of, I don't know. I think I just have to like slow down sometimes and stop what I'm doing and address like the emotional journey that they are on because it will stall things. So I think that's like where I see a lot of the author expectations set in. And sometimes I just try to give people what they want. I'm like, what's it really going to cost me? Like, is this the hill I want to die on? So it's a little bit of give and take, but.
I love that. And one thing that is brought up to me just about every week, not quite every day, sadly, maybe because our podcast is weekly, authors say that watching our podcast is actually really helpful for setting expectations. So I guess that would be my advice to all publishers is that you should have a People's Guide to Publishing podcast where you explain in complete transparent detail why you do what you're doing. And then your authors will, even though you made it for publishers, authors will watch it and then like they will trust you, which is kind of a fascinating come around.
Start a podcast or just have them watch ours if you don't want to start your own podcast.
Either way.
Yeah, or hang out with Laura Stanville. Laura's really great about that from Forest Avenue Press. She's writing a book right now that really addresses like the emotional experience. And I think it's super necessary because honestly, like I don't always have the patience or I don't have the time or I don't have the money to let something a project sort of like stall or languish. So like having somebody like Laura who's willing to like very delicately manage author expectations with them, I think is really helpful.
I do feel like emotional intelligence is like such a key component of that. And it is the one where like I would say Microcosm is not on the cutting edge remotely.
Why do you say that?
We're really great. You know, it's funny. So we like have all of our employees take like a strengths assessment when they start, and they can retake it anytime. And we just do this like cheesy free one online. It's like called High Five or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one skill that the number one strength that our employees have, one of them is like they love to learn. The other one is empathy. But neither me nor Joe scores high on empathy.
And we're normally the ones, like, we're
Is it your
normally the
tisms?
primary points of contact. So, you know, like Elly and I are very much both strategists, and like we're good at that part. So, but
We're good at problem solving.
We have had many employees who are like, this person wants this, like, can we just give that to them? And you're like, it will cause their book to tank. So it wouldn't. And then like when you like take 2 steps back, you're like, then it wouldn't make sense to publish the book at all. And so you're like, give them what they want and have their book tank, or explain to them why we can't do that and try to find audience for their book.
So
you know, I think both of those are really important, though. Like, I think both of those are included, in my opinion, in like what is empathy. Like, if you are saying that to somebody else and not directly to the author, that is empathetic, because you would make them cry, you know. And somebody's got to think about those things, like, and be able to say them in like a really succinct, harsh, and blunt way from a business standpoint. And then it can be somebody else's job to translate that into something that is like more kind. So I don't know. I would give y'all a little bit more credit than you're giving yourselves on that.
That's appreciated. Yeah, we do a lot of expectation setting, and it's mostly the way we handle it is like checklists. Like we have, like Joe does it before signing the contract, and I do it after signing the contract. And like Joe has like a whole list of kind of screening criteria, and things to say to an author before, to help them make the decision of whether to work with us or not, and to like let them kind of know how it is, and to help us make that decision too. And then I have a meeting with all of them after they sign, where we like have literally an agenda that's the same for everyone. And every time we have a problem with an author where the expectations are mismatched, or there's a conflict or something, then I add something to that agenda to try to catch it for the next person. And it doesn't always work, but because then I'm always like, why are they having feelings? But
well, I think
it's a lot to deal with.
I think too, it's like you only come up with the solutions by having gone through the problems or the challenges, right? And so, like, in a similar vein, like a lot of our strategies or some of like the rules or the guidelines that we have about what we do and don't do are only things because some authors come to us and been like, hey, that was really fucked up. That was not chill, or that wasn't like, that didn't feel like community, or like I stepped into this room and y'all were supposed to be the professionals and I felt like I was in a college class. And, you know, so like that's how we end up with better policies, is that sometimes like I can't see myself or other people, we can't see what we're doing. And yeah. And so also, can I have that checklist? I want to see your checklist.
Yeah.
We do a really extensive questionnaire too. I got one from, another publisher, and then we just like built off of it and changed it and built off of it and changed it. And so like now it's a conglomeration of like 3 or 4 different folks and ours.
Yeah, we have the intake form also that has gone through many, like we used the one from our distributor 10 years ago, and then we update that every time there's something else we need. Like our salespeople, every time someone asks for something more than once about an author, I add it to the intake form. Like our salespeople were always like, what are their favorite bookstores? Can you please just get us this information? I was like, okay, it's going on the form.
Oh, that is a great question. What are their favorite bookstores? I'm writing that down.
I know, right?
Stealing your industry knowledge.
Well, no, we're sharing it. You can't steal it. So the big one that I never would have thought of is that oftentimes a motivated author will send a lot of bodies into their local bookstore to buy their book. And so, you know, it like seems obvious in hindsight, but it didn't seem obvious in foresight that could be commanding, you know, and especially if they have a lot of friends, or if they have a big family, or if they're Mormon, or, you know, those things like really do numbers. But I don't want it to go without being pointed out. The big thing that we did is that, you know, so I used to acquire book. I do acquisitions still. And so I used to do acquisitions also. But, and I would also just like frame it around like, okay, like this is a book we can sell. Elly, make it work. And then there were a number of times where Elly was like, you have brought me this person that like has mismatched expectations, or is just wearing down the morale of the staff to deal with. Is it worth it? And so then we dialed it back, and I was like, okay, we'll screen them a little harder to make sure that they're, because, you know, everybody kind of tells you what you want to hear when you're in the acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, my book is definitely not poetry.
I mean, I've had it like happen so many times where somebody is like, I have a workbook about like how to live in your van, and then you like,
and it's half memoir.
It was 100% memoir. There was not workbook elements, and so I was like, I think you sent me the wrong file.
Oh no! Oh, it really was memoir.
It was It was a memoir, yeah. And
I don't know why people are so afraid to say that.
And like, was I not going to notice? Like,
right.
Lots of questions. But
and here's the scary thing: is they don't notice half the time. I think. I don't think they can see that it's all their story.
Yeah.
Dude, you gotta get that out of the way. That's important, and that's a part of it. But like, there's another book that you're trying to write, and you got to get that one out the way.
That never occurred to me, but you're so right.
Lighting, commentary, yeah. Hey, it's like they don't have the self-awareness, right? And you know, I have been there too. I'm guilty of lots of things in my time, but. And then the bigger thing we did more recently is we have now an onboarding call where like Elly meets with them and walks them through the material and sets expectations. And I swear that's the thing where it's like night and day before and after the onboarding call, because it's like still to this day, the authors that take up all of our time are the ones we acquired before that. And the ones that we acquired after that are like a breath of fresh air, because they understand how like decisions are made and why decisions are made, and that we're, you know, we explain it as like, this is a collaboration where we are both creative, but we have different lanes. So you stay in your lane and we stay in our lane. And if we're screwing up, you can say something, but the way to do that is not to undermine.
Mm-hmm. That's really smart.
The onboarding call is great because, I mean, first of all, I love it because I love talking to our authors. They're like the most charming people in the entire world. They're all so different, but I can just get a sense of what it's going to be like to work with them. And often I don't work with them very much after that, but I am able to be like, you know, anything from like, you know, a lot of it is clearing up misconceptions. Like there's a bunch of that stuff, but I also can like find out from them, like, what is the most important thing about publishing this book? Like, what do they want out of it? Like, that's helpful for us to know. And then also things like, you know, what's their style with deadlines? Do they need reminders? Should we set like fake early deadlines for them? Are they just self-sufficient? Like, do they prefer to work in Word or Google Docs? You know, like little things like that. Like, do they have illustrations? Like, we get ahead of any like intellectual property issues on that call. We talk about file formatting for art. We talk about like deadlines and like how we work as editors. It's so helpful.
Can I come to one of your onboarding calls?
Yeah.
That would be super cool. It sounds really helpful. Especially if it's please do. Yeah. Because I think it's always interesting hearing like what people's onboarding process is like. And like y'all are thinking about stuff that's like sort of parallel to what I'm thinking about, but it's not necessarily the same. It's very
I'd love to know yours too, if you have sort of like a standard note.
You know, yeah, I will send you ours. We have like a process that I go through with folks, and we have our questionnaires, and kind of like what we're talking about today and what I'm writing about in our newsletter right now is that I don't think that I've done a great job over the last year or so setting expectations. And so right now I'm trying to like return to our onboarding and just return to like the author's experience, be like, how can I, like, do I need to get some different project management tools here? Like, do I need to have something that shows people like, boop, you're in this stage now, boop, you're in this stage now, like or like, I'm just having a hard time sort of conveying to authors recently when the time for edits is over. I'm like, no, we are not, it's done.
I'm familiar with this challenge, and I bet I feel like with people who are more literary minded, maybe that's a little bit more of a thing because everything is focused on being like very polished and like word choice and things.
I don't know. I think it's tricky. It's tricky either way because especially with folks, like we end up working with a lot of service providers who need a book as a tool to do a thing in their practice, not necessarily a book to drop into the bookstore market. And so I think sometimes having them be so far removed from the world of literature and books as a market can be kind of hard because they truly do not know. Like once you pass through the design phase and you're in proofing, like, no, we can't go back and make changes. No, we're not going to make your name bigger. No, we're not going to add a forward in. Like, no,
Yeah.
it's done. We're done. Editorial is gone. Go.
There's so many different like author styles of anxiety.
Yes.
And we've met them all.
Yeah.
And on that note, manage your author's expectations. But you know, like it's easy. I have a friend who constantly, she gets so frustrated when like things happen where she feels like an author is out of line, and I'm like, if you set the expectations at the onboarding, like you would find this just like goes away, or at least we did. If that's not true of other people, I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, things still happen, but it is easier to talk with them if you can be like, hey, remember when we talked about this? This is the time that we're talking about. Like, this is what
that's a great phrase. That's like a therapy phrase, I mean.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.